Of the committee and are the decision makers. There is a separate councillor who is Jan Goodeve, who is the executive portfolio holder for this area of the council's business. Jan is not a member of the committee and is not a decision maker this evening. And the third category of people on this call are East Herts Council officers who are there to support and give guidance to the committee. To start with, I'm just going to ask each member of the committee, so that's each potential decision maker, just to acknowledge by a show of hands when I read out your name. Councillor Terence Beckett, Councillor Ruth Buckmaster, Councillor Rishi Fernando, Councillor Jonathan Kay, Councillor Ian Kemp, Councillor Tim Page. Sorry, Tim, thanks, Tim, very much. Councillor Carolyn Redfern. Thank you, Carolyn. Councillor Peter Ruffles. Councillor Tony Stowe. Tony is the Vice Chairman of this committee, and my name is Bob Deering, and I'm the Chairman. And then I'll ask the officers to introduce themselves. I'm afraid this is in no particular order, it's just as people appear on my screen. So, Peter Mannings, David Snell, Victoria Wilders, and I think they are the officers. Those watching on YouTube might see another name on the screen, which is Stephen King. He's an officer of East Herts Council. He operates the Zoom system for us because he's a younger generation and is on top of it all. So we're very grateful to you, Stephen. And another name that the viewing public might now see on the screen is Councillor Andrew Huggins. Councillor Huggins is not a member of the committee, but thank you, Andrew, but will be speaking tonight in his capacity as the local member relative to the application in question. And then I think we have three other people that I can see on the screen. We have Mr. Jonathan Collins, who I take it is the speaker in relation to the application. Is that correct, Mr. Collins? Yes. We have Ms. Linda Cowler, who equally is going to speak in relation to the application. Yep. Yep. Good. Okay. And Mr. Jake Griffiths, who also will speak in relation to the application. I think one of you is a local parish councillor. Is that right? Which of you is the parish councillor?
Chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Griffiths isn't a parish councillor, so that's but he is representing them.
That's very clear. Okay, thank you very much indeed. So thank you, everybody on the screen. That's very helpful for the viewing public to know where we all fit in. So if we now turn to the agenda, the first item on the agenda is apologies, and we do have a couple of apologies. I'll let Peter Mannings tell us who they are.
Yeah, apology from Councillor Andrews, and we have Councillor Bull on here as his substitute. And then finally, apology from Councillor Crystal.
Thank you very much. Item 2 is Chairman's announcements. I've got just a couple of chairman's announcements. The first is a formal announcement to explain the basis upon which this meeting is conducted virtually. So I need to read just a note to you. The local authorities and police and crime panels, coronavirus flexibility of local authority and police and crime panel meetings, England and Wales regulations 2020 came into force on Saturday, 4th April 2020 to enable councils to hold remote committee meetings during the COVID-19 pandemic period. This is to ensure local authorities can conduct business during this current public health emergency. This meeting of the Development Management Committee is being held remotely under these regulations via the Zoom application and is being recorded and streamed live on YouTube. I'd also this evening just like to make a mention of Councillor Jeff Jones. Councillor Jeff Jones has been a long-standing member of this committee, and indeed I think in the 6 years or so I've been a member of this committee, Jeff's been a member for all that period until now, when he's stood down in order that someone else will have an opportunity to sit on the committee. Jeff has been an extremely valuable colleague on the committee. He's been very diligent, very often raised good and challenging points. We're very grateful to you, Jeff, if you're watching, for your contribution, and thank you very much indeed for it. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Does any member have a declaration of interest that they wish to declare? No, thank you very much. So we move on to item 4. Item 4 relates to the minutes of the 25th of June 2020 meeting. I might just say that there was a subsequent meeting on the 15th of July, for which the minutes are not in this pack. So if we just keep clear in our mind that the minutes that are in the pack this evening are the minutes of the 25th of June meeting, can I ask for, if it be the case, for a proposer and a seconder, please? I have Councillor Ruffles proposing, thank you, and Councillor Terence Beckett seconding. In that case, can we move to a vote that the minutes are agreed, please? All in favour? And if, as usual, you could leave your hands on the screen long enough so that Peter Mannings can count them, please.
Okay, I can see all the hands up apart from Councillor Bull. Is his hand up? I can't see.
No, I can't see either, but
Chairman, I wasn't at that meeting, so I really can't vote on that, can I?
I think that's fair comment, Stan. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay.
Otherwise,
So
fine. Yeah.
I think the minutes are agreed. Now, in relation to the meeting of the 15th of July, we don't have the minutes in front of us this evening. Can we take it, Peter, that those minutes will be in front of us for the next committee meeting?
Yes.
I take it that's acceptable to everyone. Thank you. No demurring. So that's fine. Thank you very much, Peter. So we now move on then to item 5, which is the main business of the evening. This is application 3/19/2211 FUL. It's in relation to the proposed part conversion and part demolition of existing buildings, provision of mixed-use development for B1 use business, and retention of existing agricultural buildings. Erection of 26 dwellings, 10 to be affordable housing. Works to include access, landscaping, engineering, and associated works. Provision of car parking spaces and cycle spaces. The location in question is Home Farm, Munden Road, Dane End. This is the case officer for this application is David Snell. And I think I should just move immediately now, David, to ask you please to present this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Stephen, if you could just put up the site layout plan, please. That's the location plan. That's fine, thank you. Members will see that the proposal has been substantially amended since its original submission back in 2019. This has involved changes to the layout to improve the scheme, and more particularly a reduction in the number of dwellings proposed from 38 to 26. The reduction in the number of dwellings is important in considering whether the scale of development is sustainable in this location. The development lies outside the village boundary of Dutchworth. The main policy consideration is therefore policy GBR2, development in the rural area. Many representations refer to policy VIL2. However, this is not a development within the village boundary, and VIL2 is only of relevance in assessing whether the site is a sustainable location based on the village facilities. Officers have worked with the applicants to achieve a scale of development that is considered to be appropriate in this location. Hence the reason for the reduction in numbers. This is a brownfield site accommodating a number of existing established commercial units with uses ranging from a number of car associated uses through to some retail and a music studio. These uses are, as I say, established. They are not subject to planning control. The general environmental quality of the existing site cannot be regarded as good. Policy GBR2 permits the redevelopment of brownfield sites in the rural area, and policy DPS2, that's the strategic policy for development, directs development to sustainable brownfield sites. The development proposes 40% affordable housing and a potentially high standard of internal sustainability, subject to conditions. Good quality employment spaces provided to support the rural economy, which is also a policy consideration. Officers are therefore now able to recommend approval of the application to committee. There are a number of other issues of clarification and information to go through. At paragraph 9.2 of the report, that is the planning obligations for the county council, those figures are now incorrect. The secondary education figure is now 305,748,000. The youth contribution is 1,118,000, so the report is correct. And the library's contribution is 4,526,000. I'll provide some clarification about paragraph 9.5 and what I've said there about other contributions. The application provides 40% affordable housing, so it does not need to provide a viability review in terms of policy requirements. In these circumstances, officers make a judgment as to what is reasonable and reasonably related to the development in accordance with the requirements of regulations relating to contributions. No projects have been identified that could benefit from this proposal, and as members are aware from previous applications, contributions need to be specific, relating to specific projects in order to pass the tests. And in such circumstances, given the scale of development, which is 26 dwellings, so not substantial in the sense of, for example, strategic sites, officers consider that the contributions are reasonable. I'll go on to issues raised by residents in consultation. You'll see from the report that I have gone through some of those issues, but I'll clarify some others. And I will refer you to late reps as well, wherein 10 additional responses have been received, 1 in support of the application, 8 in objection, and 1 neutral. Firstly, the issue of overlooking of an immediately adjoining property has been raised. I would advise that the window-to-window distance maintained is at a minimum of approximately 35 metres, which is considered to be relatively normal distance in order to address overlooking issues. Secondly, I would advise that the wall on the southern boundary of the site is to be retained and no works are proposed to it. Thirdly, as a point of information in respect of sustainability, I would advise members that there is no gas supply to this site. That is important in terms of sustainable heating, etc., where, as members are aware, on some submissions, for example, domestic heating has been proposed as gas. There's no gas supply to this site. Lastly, I would like to amend condition 24 as recommended in your report to read: the construction of the development hereby approved shall be carried out in accordance with the provisions for CO2 emissions, energy and water savings identified in the energy strategy by Sadler Energy, the sustainability statement and other supporting documents. So that part is the same, but it will go on to read: in accordance with details to be submitted and approved in writing by the local planning authority. The details shall include details of how the development is to achieve a minimum reduction of 20% in CO2 emissions over building regulations, and a minimum of 110 litres per person per day water consumption. Those are the figures from the energy strategy. It will go on to say that the details those details will be implemented as approved and maintained. A further part of that condition will be that details of the renewable energy measures identified in the energy strategy will be submitted and approved. Thank you, Chairman. I will just go through the slides for the benefit of the members. This is the site layout. The buildings in your, I won't do compass, I will do, so top right hand corner as you look, adjoining Munden Road. Those are largely the converted buildings to residential use. Going further south, those are largely, and central part of the site, those are largely the new development. housing development, new build. And to the, so that would be top left-hand corner, you have your employment contribution development. One of those buildings is a retained conversion and one is a new build. If you can go through the slides, Stephen, slowly. This is the layout of one of the converted buildings in terms of housing layout. A terrace of housing. This slide is of the elevations and plans of one of the new build houses. Thank you. Again, an elevation of, this is the elevation of the, I think that's also conversion. This is an elevation and plan of one of the employment buildings. And that is a second elevation of and plan of the converted employment building. Another elevation of residential. And likewise. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, David. We've got atmospheric conditions today, haven't we? Thunderstorms and whatnot. So there were little bits that we where we lost you there, David. So I'm just going to ask you one question, please. I didn't quite catch what you were saying about the distance of windows relative to the neighbouring property.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. I'm still not muted, I believe.
This is true.
An issue was raised by the occupier of an adjoining property in relation to overlooking. I advised in what I said that the minimum window to window distance maintained is a distance of approximately 35 meters, which is regarded as reasonable and fairly normal in relation to new developments and sufficient to address this concern. Did you miss anything else, Chairman?
I'm not sure that I did, but I am just going to ask members out there if they felt that there was anything else they'd missed that they'd like David to cover again. Yeah, Jonathan.
It's not major, but when you were going through the illustrations, I think it was after the conversion, we saw a picture and I didn't hear at all what that, simply because of the technical reasons, what that actually was.
Okay. I went through the slides quite quickly. They are actually just representations. So I've picked out some elevations and some plans of both converted buildings and new buildings. And I merely went through those. Initially, the converted building residential, then the new build residential, and going on to the lastly to the converted and new build employment buildings.
Thanks very much.
Okay, I'm just looking at my screen to see if any other member wants David to just cover anything again.
Just to let you know, Chairman, I am struggling with the atmospherics.
Yeah, that's okay. It's beyond your control. Okay, I'm not seeing any members' hands up, so I think we're content that we've got enough from you, at least for the time being, David, that we need. So I think we now move into the public speakers, and we will start with a speaker who is against the proposal, and this is Mrs. Linda Cowler, who's down there at the bottom of the screen. Now, before you start to speak, just let me explain the rules of engagement. You'll get 3 minutes, and you will be cut off if you want when you hit 3 minutes. The 3 minutes will start once you've unmuted yourself. So just make sure you're ready to go. And from the moment you unmute, Peter will time you, and you've got 3 minutes. Over to you.
Thank you. My husband and I are the owners of Home Farm Cottage, which shares the boundary with Home Farm. Our house is a Grade 2 listed property, which we purchased 14 years ago. Our reasons for purchasing this property was because we wanted to stay in the village which we loved and wanted a home that was private and secluded. We have 4 children, and this was and still is the perfect home for us. We've provided you with some photographs taken from our garden and bedroom that I hope you've had a chance to look at. They show why we are objecting to part of the development taking place on the Home Farm. I must emphasise that we're not objecting to the development per se, but to the fact that our needs have not been considered as neighbours of the new homes that will be built in very close proximity to our home. As you will see from the photographs, the boundary wall that separates our 2 properties shows that the land on the farm side is much higher than ours. The ground level to top of the wall is approximately 8 foot on our side, but only around 4 foot on the farm side. The new houses that are proposed to be built along our boundary wall will be significantly higher than ours, and resulting in them towering above us and us being grossly overlooked. This will be an invasion of our privacy, with not just one new neighbour, but approximately 7 homes having their view as our back garden. These homes will be able to look directly into our garden, kitchen and bedroom from their position. We object to the fact that we are the only true neighbours of the proposed development and have not been given any consideration under point 8.18. And in fact, we feel purposely ignored in the process of the proposed housing development. We are concerned that there's been no mention of the preservation of the listed wall that runs the full length of our 2 properties. The listed wall is a major contribution to our privacy and the historic and architectural significance of our home and indeed the village. Home Farm and Home Farm Cottage are equally responsible for the upkeep and maintenance of this wall. On our side of the wall, you will see that it's brick. However, on the farm side, where the new development is taking place, it is a flint-lined wall that must be preserved and is already in major need of repair as it has not been properly maintained. The new housing will see that many houses sharing this wall with us, and there's been no written discussion from relevant authorities as to where the responsibility lie, cost implications in preservation of the wall, and restrictions on amendments to the wall in the future. In order for us to consent to planning taking place, please, we are just simply proposing and pleading that the houses are either pushed back, lowered to natural ground level, or there is an introduction of an 8-foot wall behind the existing one in order to preserve the wall and allow us some privacy. We do not feel that this is too much to ask and plead for your consideration in this matter. We're not the type of neighbours that would normally complain or object, and we feel that we are already being accommodating by allowing the development to take place next to us. We also feel it is our duty as neighbours to preserve the historical features of our village and to keep our village as a quiet.
3 minutes up, Mrs. Cowler. Thank you very much. Thank you. We now have a speaker for the proposal, and this is Mr. Jonathan Collins. Mr. Collins, you have exactly the same rules of engagement, so you have 3 minutes. They'll start from the moment you unmute yourself, and you will be cut off if you're still speaking at the end of the 3rd minute. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. We're pleased to be before this committee today with after a constructive journey with officers and extensive public consultation with a firm recommendation for approval. We're also proud to say that our proposals are the product of open, collaborative engagement with the local community, having canvassed nearly 200 homes door to door and received 65 letters of support. Our original concept proposed 46 family homes, which has now been substantially reduced to 26, and now also proposes 4 new rural employment units. These are complementary to the local character and assist other key local employers such as Little Mundon Primary School and Dane End Village Stores, who support this mixed-use scheme and recognise it will improve village vitality. The officer report confirms that this is a brownfield site on the edge of Dane End and that our proposals are consistent with the development plan. Much of the site is used for open storage, and the existing buildings are beyond their economic life and contain uses which are unsuitable for this location. This presents an opportunity for an environmentally sustainable design that reuses the historic brick buildings alongside new energy efficient homes that echo the character of Dane End. In the same vein, we intend to enhance the setting of the neighbouring listed buildings through the creation of an attractive new orchard and the preservation of the southern boundary wall. This will also be a public open space for all residents of the village. Our proposals have been scrutinised by the relevant statutory consultees, who have all found that our solutions are technically suitable. There is no sewage, drainage, heritage or overlooking issues that cannot be overcome. Furthermore, Herts County Council fully support the highways proposals and endorsed our approach to improve pedestrian safety by slowing traffic entering the village, designating pedestrian policy priority areas and the provision of a new bus stop. The current pandemic has changed working practices, with many people proposing to work from home. It has brought into focus the need for quality housing with decent outside space. This development will repurpose a brownfield site to provide modern homes in a sustainable location as agreed with the council, and fibre broadband and an electric charging point to each home. In 1800, home farms stood at the centre of Dane End. The vast majority of homes in Dane End were built in the 1960s and 70s. Residents who currently enjoy living in these homes built in the orchards of Dane End are now an intrinsic part of the community. And we as a local business passionately believe that villages also deserve investment that is thoughtfully designed around modern sustainability principles in order to thrive. Previously, officers have mentioned that this development could be an exemplar of sustainable rural design in the borough. We hope that you agree that we've achieved this and will support this application and our vision for regenerating this corner of Dane End. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Collins. We now have a speaker, Mr. Jed Griffiths, who is representing Little London Parish Council. Mr. Griffiths, you won't be surprised to know that the rule, well, let me just check. Peter Mannings, are the rules of engagement the same for a parish council representative? In other words, 3 minutes. You're muted, Peter.
Exactly the same, Chair, yes.
Okay, so Mr. Griffiths, we've established that you have 3 minutes. They'll start when you unmute, and if you are still speaking at the end of 3 minutes, we will cut you off. Over to you. Thank you. You're muted. You're mute. Unmute yourself.
Thank you. Right. The Parish Council maintains its opposition to the scheme on 5 grounds. The housing element is too large. The Parish Council notes the advice set out in the officer's report, which you've heard this evening. The application site, yes, is outside the development boundary of the Group 2 settlement of Dane End. It must therefore be determined against GBR2, not VIL 2. As stated in the officer's report, the site is clearly to be considered as previously developed land, where there is a presumption in GBR2 brackets E in favour of redevelopment of existing buildings. The presumption, however, is not automatic. It must be considered alongside other factors. Although the site is not within the village boundary, it is adjacent to it. Any development on the site must be assessed in terms of the impact on the village as a whole. In this respect, the Parish Council consider that the proposed development of 26 dwellings is still too large for a small rural village, where the district plan strategy seeks to concentrate development in the towns and major urban extensions and Group 1 settlements. The Parish Council is not alone in representing these concerns. You've got a number of objections from other East Hertfordshire parish councils. Second, the loss of employment. In its original objection, the Parish Council has drawn attention to the potential loss of existing employment at Home Farm, amounting to 11 businesses and 27 jobs. These will not be offset totally by the proposed B1 units. The losses will affect the livelihood of many local families and have a negative effect on the rural economy. Thirdly, access and highways. Concerns have been noted about the effects of the proposed development on the local highway network and road safety. The revised transport assessment, however, seeks to address these issues and is now supported by HCC Highways. The Parish Council, however, together with many other objectors, is opposed to the retention of what is called the virtual footpath in Munden Road. This clearly is impracticable and should be removed from the highways package. Fourthly, landscape impact. The Parish Council notes that the Council Landscape Officer has recommended refusal of the application on landscape grounds. This would appear to endorse the Parish Council's previous views on the landscape impact of the development. There should be a comprehensive strategy agreed now, not as a condition. This would soften the impact of the development, especially on the approach from the south. And there are, fifthly, concerns about mains drainage.
Yes, I'm afraid to say that your 3 minutes are up. Thank you very much. Thank you. We've now got the local member, it's Councillor Andrew Huggins, who wishes to speak. And again, I'm just looking in Peter Manning's direction. Because Councillor Huggins is a local member, he does not have a time restriction. That's correct, isn't it, Peter?
Correct, yes, at your discretion, yes.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. All right, Councillor Huggins, over to you. Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman, members, officers, and for the residents viewing in Dane End. I don't think I'll be taking much more than the 3 minutes myself. We've heard from the speakers already tonight the main issues surrounding this application. I first of all want to commend the developer. Quite often we hear complaints of them not consulting widely, and I've certainly had several conversations with them and productive conversations about the options of the scheme. I just want to bring members' attention to a few elements from the report tonight. As we have just heard from the Parish Council's speaker, the decision to not use Village 2. The village boundary runs down the side of the application site. And as the first speaker said, when she said that she came to join the village, and her house is sitting to the south on Munden Road. So I think members would be well advised to just bear in mind that the site very much feels like it is part of the village, and therefore some consideration should be given to the rules and implications that Village 2 brings. Limited infill, and this application will be a 10% increase on the size of Dane End. So I would ask members to scrutinise that in your session shortly. I also want to bring attention to the loss of employment land, something in this current pandemic which is very important, and as members will know, as we are seeing businesses suffering and loss of jobs, it is absolutely crucial that we support successful businesses and protect business land. Of the 11 businesses that are on there, some are more frequently used than others, but it is a loss to the local community to lose the car salvage and repair operation that is there. It is a site that is particularly set out for them, and one that would be very difficult for them to replace. So I want members to consider the loss of employment land issues with this application. If the application is successful tonight, I hope that officers will bear in mind the proximity of the A602 improvement works when considering the traffic management plan, as the roads around there are going to become a lot of rat running getting around roadworks, and so I think careful consideration to that will be needed. Lastly, as the parish council were just about to bring up when they got cut off, the sewage and draining works, I think members should pay particular attention to that as that comes up, and look at that element of the report. We certainly don't want to see the swale system be brought in place. I understand that that is dealt with at condition, but I want to bring members' attention to it. That is basically it from me. I, in general terms, support the application as it is. I think it is well designed and will bring new people to the village, which will help support the long-term viability of the school, the shop and the pub. But I do want to add weight that hasn't been added in the report to that loss of employment land and the fairly strict application of not using Village 2. That's it from me, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Huggins. Okay, members, we've now got to the stage where members raise questions. I'm looking for hands. So I'll try and take them in batches as usual. I've got Councillor Terence Beckett, and Councillor Carolyn Redfern, and Councillor Jonathan Kay. So we'll take those three questions in that order, please. We'll come back to you, Stan, next time round. Thank you. Councillor Beckett. Thank
you, Chair. I'll probably have a few as we go through this evening. Two things that came up, one from the resident. I'd just like some clarification from Officer Snell, please, on the impact of land height differences on loss of privacy. In his report, Pracy, you were saying that 35 metres is acceptable, window to window. But of course, it is the whole thing about the loss of privacy in their back garden as well, which is currently a private domain for those guys. And the height, I've had this in my own ward as well, where there's a huge height difference. Of course, it feels very imposing on other residents. So I just really would like some clarification on that. And the other one, which I should probably throw down a bit further down the line, but I'll bring it up now anyway, which is more of a question for the developer. Talking heavily about COVID and changing working practices and people working from home in a high quality house. I would like officers and the developer to look at the identification of a space in the houses that would be used as a home office, and that those spaces have mitigation for glare, good ventilation and extra power sockets so that people aren't daisy chaining unsafely extension leads in order to be able to use their office equipment within those rooms. That's it for now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Beckett. I think Councillor Redfern was the second hand up. Need to, you know, unmute. That's it. Well done.
Yes, I am also very, very concerned about the reduction in employment. The actual, I'm not sure that this matters that much, but the actual space is going to be about, for employment, is going to be, I think, about an eighth of what it is at the moment. But really, it's the loss of jobs, 27 jobs, and there's no sort of there's no information about what the number of jobs that are going to be replaced. And I think this is a terrible thing to do to a rural economy when something is thriving. So that worries me. It says somewhere in page 8.9, the retention of, right. Policy sets out that for non-designated employment sites, oh no, it's not that, sorry. It's about the I just wonder, what does low employment use mean exactly? Low employment use. Does that mean that a lot of ground is being used for, that needs very few employers? employees, or does it mean that the sort of jobs that are being provided by this employment are not very good jobs? I also worry that the jobs that replace the jobs that are lost will be different kinds of jobs. So the people who lost their jobs won't be able to work there or apply for them because they're not in the same sort of area. That's all for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kay.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a few points on clarification. 5.4 talks about Thames Water requesting a condition about wastewater infrastructure improvements. Perhaps you can just tell me a little bit more about what that is. 5.6, Hertfordshire County Council Historic Environment Unit, pre-commencement condition, assets of archaeological interest. A bit of clarification on what that is. 5.9 is about the revised parking layout, which says that the Herts Police Crime Prevention Advisor raised concerns about the parking layout proposed in the original proposals. I wonder if you can tell me what their concerns were on those original proposals, because there's been no response apparently received to the consultation on the revised layout. I agree with the ward councillor, Councillor Huggins, that actually this development will be good for the local economy, for the shop, for the pub, and of course for maintaining the future, good for the future of the school. And I welcome Mr. Collins's comment saying that overlooking issues can be overcome, which I'm sure that Mrs. Cowler will be pleased to hear about, but we just need to ensure that these are not just nice words, that they, in terms of her concerns, that they really can be overcome. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Kay. Okay, David Snell, if you can provide us with some responses to those questions, points.
Do my best, Chairman.
Yeah.
If I could start at the overlooking issue. Yes, there is a changing ground level perceptible on the site. I have seen it, but the relationship, which is not a direct relationship of window to window of 35 meters, is considered to be acceptable. It's and perfectly normal. Furthermore, the relationship of windows to rear gardens is fairly normal. Yes, I appreciate that there is no potential at all for overlooking at the moment because there's no housing development there. In assessing an application, we can't have regard to the fact that you know nothing's there. We have regard to whether we consider that there is an overlooking issue, and we do not consider that there's a material overlooking issue. In terms of boundary treatment and levels of the development, there are conditions dealing with both of those matters. So details of levels of the base of the buildings have to be submitted, and details of meter enclosure have to be submitted. It would not be appropriate, I have to say, to advise you that the provision of an 8-foot wall, 8-foot fencing as suggested by the adjoining resident, would be appropriate in terms of adjoining the already historic wall. It just wouldn't be appropriate in terms of the setting of that wall, which is an historic feature, heritage feature. In terms of loss of employment, yes, I take the point, but I have to advise members, I don't necessarily agree with the figures that have been presented. They are, I don't have basis for those figures, and there are no submissions about loss of existing employment. Clearly there will be some loss of existing employment, but as I've said, some of the uses on site, none of the uses are controllable by planning, because they are historic and established. In fact, for a greater proportion of the site, a certificate of lawfulness existing use has been granted. A proportion of those uses are low employment. They're related to things like car accident recovery and storage. There is a music studio. There is some retail, which is also low employment. And when we're looking at these things, we have to look at the balance of all considerations. Yes, I accept that there's some loss of employment, but the general positiveness of the application would outweigh that consideration in officers' view. Councillor Kay, I would also say that because those uses are established, I would add that they are difficult to control, and there has been enforcement issues over the years. In terms of Councillor Kay, Thames Water improvements, that is to the network. So that's what Thames Water might have to do, not necessarily have to do, in terms of network capacity. To accommodate the new development, basically. Thames Water have no objection subject to that condition. 5.6 archaeology, that is a normal requirement, particularly in the rural area, and in areas that are likely to be of archaeological significance. So that condition relating to archaeology is always a pre-commencement condition. So the survey work has to be carried out prior to the development, and then a report is done on the findings. And then the second part of that condition, which is a separate submission, later submission, is a report on the findings and what significance they are and how they are going to be documented, or indeed in some cases retained in museums, or in other circumstances retained in their setting, so below ground, in other words. That is normal. It's always a requirement and must be carried out prior to the development. The survey work involves a number of things. It may be, you've probably seen on television, the seismic survey. It will also involve trenches across the site and that sort of thing. Those findings are referred to the Historic Environment Unit at the Council, who advise us on those matters. I think I would, oh yes, the issue about was it the Constabulary Safety Advisor?
The revised parking layout.
Yes. The issue raised initially by the consultee from the Constabulary is a fairly normal issue raised by them, which was that there was insufficient overlooking of the parking in the original layout. There is no response on the to consultation on the revised layout, But what I can say is because the proposals are less dense and the layout has been revised, then I can't say that that issue doesn't arise, but certainly there will be much, it will be much improved. I think that covers it on those questions.
I think we picked up those questions. Yeah, thank you very much, David. I've got Stan from last time, and then Tony Stowe and Ian Kemp.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I've heard, I mean, this development's got a lot going for it. And I've heard what the officers said about the overlooking from the next door neighbours, but I'm still concerned. It's not the 35 metres of distance, it's the ground level. It definitely overbearing that property. The other question, the other thing I'd like to ask, for the affordable homes, would the local youngsters have priority for those particular homes when they're built? Another question, that I understand that there are going to be some business buildings built there, but in the past we've had experience as a committee where the developer comes back and says there's nobody willing to take these properties on, in which case they apply for more housing. Is that possible that this could raise its head again? Now, there is a lot of concern by local people about the footpaths adjacent to this this area. I just wonder if the officers have taken this into consideration. But certainly this development has got a lot going for it, but they're my concerns, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Bull. I think the next up was Councillor Tony Stowe.
Thank you, Chairman. A few points. Being there's some old buildings there, old barns and stuff, there will presumably be an inspection for bats. I didn't see it anywhere. And if there bats are found, can we ensure that there are bat boxes put on the site? That's the first point. The next one was, are we absolutely sound by your comment earlier about the 40% affordable housing, that will not change because there's no viability on it? And the last point I wanted to answer is on, I note in the notes that there's decisions yet to be made whether the surface water drainage will be a permeable system or it may well go back into the local river. I can't remember the name of the river now. But the other thing I think is quite helpful is if we can get a condition where water butts are provided at each house, because that means people can use that for watering the garden rather than using tap water. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stowe. And Councillor Ian Kemp.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, that end of the village and quite a few existing properties aren't easy to access at the moment safely by footpath because the road has no footpath alongside it. I'd like to have some further details of this virtual footpath that has been mentioned, what it actually entails, and will it be of benefit to other properties as well as this new development? Secondly, I welcome the fact that existing buildings have been retained. Vernacular buildings are being retained and indeed should be smartened up. The one adjacent to Munden Road in particular is in a rather sorry state at the moment, and it will be good to see that put back into full use. However, it has no windows opposite Munden Road, and I wasn't sure whether exactly what was going to be provided in the way of windows, if anything, and whether that will provide enough light to give attractive housing, which provides a good standard for the occupants. On the question of employment, I think we share the concerns as to whether, the potential loss of jobs, although from my brief visit, it didn't look as if there was a great deal of activity going on at the moment. But it'd be useful to know, is there any indication as to how many jobs might be provided in the new businesses to offset it? And that would be a helpful thing to know. And also, of the existing businesses, have any of them actually objected to the new development plans, or do they seem happy to move? Finally, I think it's very good to see the attention that's been given to sustainability. The development appears to be going to produce well under the normal or further reductions compared to those required in the past for the carbon footprint, and that is very welcome. It's interesting that the site has no gas to it at present, and this seems therefore to give an ideal opportunity to provide the heating by things like air source heat pumps or other low carbon methods, given that gas boilers are likely to be intended to be outlawed in new builds in the next few years anyway. So hopefully that will be the case. On the water side, it just comes down to the 110 litre limit, and I commend Tony Stowe's point on whether rainwater collection and any other forms of water harvesting and further water reduction can be achieved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kemp. Okay, David Snell, if you'd like to respond to those sets of questions, we'd be grateful.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll go back to overlooking to start. Yes, I've heard the views. My view, as I have said, is that the distancing is acceptable. There is a levels condition on the application, which details have to be submitted, and that sets the base level of the adjoining land and buildings. That is a condition. Details will need to be submitted, such as cross sections and the start level, cross sections that across the site and adjoining land. When those details are considered, officers will certainly look at that issue, which is the reason for the condition, and assess the base level at that time and whether it is acceptable in relation to the level of the adjoining land. I can say no more on that issue at the moment. Affordable housing and local occupation. Very desirable, but not something we can achieve, I'm afraid, in terms of current policy. Current policy on affordable housing is, to all intents and purposes, set by national planning policy framework and guidance, and we can go so far as to require housing that is affordable. We cannot direct who occupies that housing. Under the Section 106 agreements that we use, which are standard, that affordable housing provider is a registered provider. So in the old days, that would be a housing association. It's not a housing association anymore. There are a number of registered providers, and the council has nomination rights generally to the affordable housing, but not specifically. Even the council, the housing partner of the council, as you know, housing is affordable housing is largely directed by the adopted points system, and that is a national thing. It's not a local thing. So it just really depends on the needs of various people in the village compared with the needs of others. Housing is not directed normally within those criteria to places where people merely want to live. You know, you get a choice, and you can opt to not take that choice, but you only have so many choices. So I think that addresses that issue. And the issue of whether the employment would be taken up, times are difficult. as we all know. There is no guarantee that business development being developed at the moment will find a tenant. There are a number of factors, including COVID-19, unfortunately, that will have an impact on that. In terms of providing more housing because of that, as I said at the beginning, I will relate that back to the negotiated scale of development that officers consider to be acceptable. And we did not find that the initial 38 dwellings in this location was acceptable and required a reduction. So that gives you some idea of the general thought process in terms of sustainability. We would have to, should an application come in later, we would have to consider it on its merits. We can't prejudge that, but that gives you some idea of the policy background to that. Virtual footpaths. It was a new one on me recently, I have to say, but there are a number in the district, and they are fairly new as a form of mitigation. And what they are physically is a zone. They're a bit like cycle paths on existing roads. So there will be a demarcation between the road and a footpath, and usually it's a different colour surface, whether it be green, red, or whatever it is. That's something that the Highway Authority will deal with under the Section 278 Highways Agreement. It's not because it's outside the site. It's not something that the planning application will deal with. But that a virtual footpath is that, to put it sort of simply, there's no curb. So there is demarcation, but no curb. There may be a slight difference in level, depending on what design the Highway Authority accept or require. Those provisions and any 278 agreement by the Highway Authority is always subject to a highway safety audit. So there's proposals in detail would have to address that issue. In terms of the virtual footpath, I'm skipping about different issues raised by different members here, but some of them are linked. So in terms of the virtual footpath being of benefit to existing dwellings, objections have been received from residents in the vicinity of the site relating to highway safety and indeed objecting to a footpath. But in real terms, in terms of highway mitigation, I would have to say that it is of wider benefit to existing dwellings because there's no footpath at the moment into the village, and in walking terms, existing residents have to walk on the road. Bats, Councillor Stowe. There's no evidence of bats at present. As you probably know, bats are the subject of legislation other than planning. In any event, they are the subject of planning, but they are subject of protection in wider law. So there is no condition requiring that survey because an issue wasn't raised by psychology, basically. Yes, drainage. Both of the two option schemes put forward by the applicant are sustainable. So both schemes are a sustainable form of drainage. Infiltration is more sustainable in the hierarchy, but both are sustainable, and it will largely depend on survey work subsequent to any permission granted as to which is feasible. When the condition details pursuant to condition are received, we consult with the lead local flood authority, which is the county, and they advise us on those matters. But both are essentially sustainable drainage. Water butts, they are featured in the submissions of the application, and I haven't conditioned it directly, but I think it is encompassed, but they are mentioned in the overall sustainable design strategy as being something that the applicant wishes to provide. Windows, Councillor Kemp, yes, there are windows, and of course lighting to dwellings is not only controlled by planning, but there is a minimum requirement by the building regulations, which are about to be toughened up, as some members will be aware. It's difficult to know whether any existing businesses responded to consultation. It wasn't apparent in reading them that a response from an existing business was amongst them. So I can't say no for definite, but I have read all the responses, and it wasn't apparent that there was a response from a local business, other than that is businesses on the site. There were responses from businesses within the village, as you are aware. I think that covers it, Chairman.
I thought Councillor Kemp had a question about heating. Maybe you've covered that. And I think he asked, and maybe you just can't answer this, whether we've got any way of knowing whether the sort of the balance on employment might mean that we might be up, or with overall more new jobs.
I just don't know, Chairman. It depends what businesses take or do not take the employment space provided. There may be, it's not beyond the possibility that some of the existing uses would be accommodated there. It's entirely possible some may not wish to move. There are quite good uses existing on the site, not necessarily in good accommodation, but there are some uses on the site which are appropriate to a rural area, and may well go into the new employment space provided. I just don't know.
Okay. And Councillor Kemp, are you happy that your question about heating has been picked up sufficiently for you?
Well, it wasn't answered, but if anything, if there is anything that can be said about it, would be helpful, particularly this question about electrical, gas, and forms of heating that might be used.
Yeah. David, I'm going to ask you just to hold on that, because we'll get some more questions in. We've got Councillor Ruth Buckmaster. I'm looking for any more hands at the moment. Councillor Stowe and Councillor Redfern, in that order. Councillor Buckmaster.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I've been very interested in this plan and the design and the layout of it. And I was very interested in the landscaping plan. I was very interested to see the orchard, and I was concerned about bat and bird boxes and whether they would be sited. I was pleased to see on the list of plants that we're going to have some local varieties, and especially for me, the fact there were going to be some rivers variety of trees. I couldn't find whether they were going to be on dwarf rooting stock or were they going to be full-size trees, because what's the maintenance? Is there going to be a maintenance company? I couldn't find any details of who ends up looking after this, and are they there for the benefit of all the residents on that site? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Buckmaster. I can't remember if it was Tony Stowe or Carolyn Redfern. We'll take you first, Carolyn. Let Tony sweat it out for a bit longer.
Sorry. Okay. Hello. Thank you. You caught me on the hop there because I thought I was following Tony Stowe. Oh, it was about the bat boxes. I don't know whether is it my mistake, but amongst the documents, I did read that there had been a bat survey and bats had been detected, and there was a plan in place to cope with them. But I've just heard that there are no bats there now, so I'm a little bit confused. I wonder if you could just clarify that for me. Thank you.
Okay, Tony Stone, we've let you sweat long enough. It's your turn now.
Thank you, Chairman. It was just that, first of all, David didn't answer my question on, because there's no viability study, how firm is the 40% affordable house? And I'd like that clarified. And also, when I read in page 44, section 8.5, it says, due to the car, sort of breaking of cars and stuff like that, I assume there could be contamination on the site. Now, the reason I bring that up is that will that afford a reduction in the level of the ground, and how much soil would need to be removed from this site, which could be the answer to getting the level similar to the ones on the other side of the brick wall? If you could carry that, would be great. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, David Snell, if you could just respond with the tail end of Councillor Kemp's question and then move on to the...
which was about heating, I believe.
Yes, yeah.
There are a number of options in the strategy, but because there's no gas supply to the site, none of them are gas. And you have made reference to that. The condition 24 that I amended covers the detail for submissions of whichever form of heating that the developer wishes to provide. But in terms of the fact that it also covers the issue about renewables and the provision of renewables. So those points are addressed by condition, but it certainly won't be gas.
Okay, thank you.
Going on, the orchard, Councillor Buckmaster, the strategy, the submissions thus far are a strategy, they're not a detail. So there is a condition recommended, standard condition. It's one of the short standard conditions recommended in the beginning of the conditions, which requires details of landscape design. That will govern the type of planting, the size of planting, and the density of planting, and they'll all be dealt with under the condition. In terms of the orchard, yes, an orchard is provided. It is a green feature, and it is part of the development and part of the green infrastructure of the development. It's not intended to be private. Maintenance, I think you raised, that is a section 106 issue. There will be a requirement for, again, a standard 106 issue. If I haven't mentioned it in the recommendation, I will add it. You'll see that I have sought delegated authority to amend the 106 as necessary and conditions. It is a standard clause regarding the setting up of management company or an alternative for future maintenance of the landscaping. Indeed, all the open areas on the site. Bat boxes. I hope I didn't say that bats weren't present. If I did, I apologise. There are bats present, but it wasn't recommended by Hearts Ecology. In fact, a condition requiring bat boxes wasn't recommended by Hearts Ecology, but I'm quite happy again to review that, and a condition could be added to that effect in terms of biodiversity gain. That would be fairly standard practice. I think I'm through that, Chairman.
Got Councillor Stowe, contamination, removal of soil.
Oh yeah. Yes, there is as always, or usually always, there is a contamination condition. Similar to the archaeological condition, that is a two-part condition. So firstly, a survey is required, and that involves sampling. You've probably seen the rigs on sites which do the drilling, and a report, and should contamination be found, then a remediation strategy. I can't say at this point whether that will involve the removal of earth and lowering of levels. It may well do. What happens when we receive those details is that we consult environmental health, and they assess those details.
That's fine for now, David. Thank you very much. Now,
Chairman, can I, second time I've asked him, I asked about the viability study not being used. Does that guarantee the 40% housing, affordable housing?
I do apologise, Councillor Stowe and Chairman. In the terms of this particular application, it is 40%. That is what the applicant, the application submitted as part, the applicant submitted as part of the application. There has been no requirement for officers to press for any further requirement, or as in some cases of applications we received, it was 40% as submitted. In terms of this application, that is it. If there was a subsequent reduction, going back to what I said previously, anything less than 40% is subject to viability review, and should there be a viability issue, there would then be an application for variation of the planning permission. So in terms of this application, 40% is what it is. I do apologise for not responding to that.
Thank you very much, David, and sorry we didn't pick that up quicker, Tony. I've got Councillors Ruffles and Page, who've had their hands up a little bit now. And if there is a third member that has a question, we'll take that now. Otherwise, we've had a good chat. We must be drawing near the end of the debate. Caroline, your hand's up again. If you've got a new point, then we'll run it in now. So we'll take Councillor Ruffles, Councillor Page, and Councillor Redfern in that order, please.
Well, Chairman, like you, I'd come to the point when I think I want to propose the approval of the application, but it may be that you want to hear from Councillor Page, whose hand has been up for a very long time, like mine. and Councillor Redfern.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ruffles. Councillor Page.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I've got 2 or 3 questions on highways and parking. First of all, on the virtual footway, will any provision be made or be available for lighting that virtual footway? Secondly, in the officer's report at 8.22, it says that the existing access on Munden Road towards the north of the site will be narrowed to form a pedestrian access only. I'm just interested to know what the consequences are to current provision. And thirdly, are there any incentives available towards using sustainable transport?
Thank you very much, Councillor Page. And Councillor Redfern, if you have a new point, you've had a couple of cracks at the whip already, but if it's a new point, by all means, raise it.
Thank you very much for that. I just wanted to point out that I'm sorry to get boring about this, but there are no social housing. There's no social housing proposed at all. And I think this is something we must bear in mind on every application. And that's all. Thank you. Thank you for your forbearance.
Thank you very much. Coming back to Councillor Ruffles, I think we need to hear what David Snell has to say about Councillor Page's comments, and then we'll come back to you if you're still ready to propose. Thank you. So, David, where are you now? If you could give us some comments in relation to Councillor Page's questions.
I'll try, Chairman. I lost Councillor Page towards the end, but I'll see what I can do. In terms of the virtual footway, that is outside of the planning application control. As I said, the highway mitigation measures are matters to be considered by the Highway Authority under the Section 278 agreement and subject to usually, to audit, safety audit. I am fairly sure that if it's found on that safety audit lighting is required, it will form part of the requirement under the Section 278 agreement, but it's not a subject that we can require under the planning permission. In terms of sustainable transport, the Highway Authority's view is that the mitigation comes under the bracket of sustainable transport provision because it seeks to enhance footpath access to the village and the village facilities and beyond to the school. And those are the measures that the Highway Authority have recommended. As I said, there is no contribution that I would say is justifiable beyond that, and it was not something requested by the Highway Authority. The mitigations in terms of sustainable transport, and that's how they are headed by the Highway Authority under the highways policies that recently adopted, are relatively significant in terms of a development of this size in terms of cost. It hasn't been assessed yet. I don't have any details. That's just a comment from my experience that I would say that they will be significant in cost terms. Didn't understand the reference to social housing. 40% of affordable housing is proposed, so I didn't understand that. And I think that's covered it, Chairman.
Okay, I think Tim Page, has put his hand up again, rather than just fixing his screen.
Thank you. I had a third question. What are the consequences of changing the access movements towards the north on Munden Road? It's 8.22 spot 5. what's the implications of changing that access on existing use?
Thank you, Chairman. The closing of that access to pedestrian only was something that was required by the Highway Authority. They didn't regard it as a suitable standard of access for the type of vehicles that will be accessing the site, such as refuse vehicles and hopefully not, but emergency vehicles. It is also part of the improvement of pedestrian access from into the village. So it's a safe pedestrian access onto the virtual footpath, if you like. Also, we were keen to separate the employment traffic from the residential traffic. Clearly, you don't want, even if it's like vans, which it probably would be in this case, given the types of unit, you don't want that going through the residential area. So there is separate accesses for the employment, which comes off the existing farmyard essentially, and new access into the residential use.
Thank you, David. Okay, I think we've had a very good debate. I'm just about to move to Peter Ruffles, but before I do, David, can I just make a couple of really quick comments myself? There's been a lot of conversation about bats and butts. I wonder whether we can toughen up any of the conditions that are presently proposed in relation to bats and butts. My sense is that it's your feeling that we could, in which case this is doable. Is that right? Because if it is doable, I think we should do it.
I can add a condition with regard to the provision of bat boxes in buildings, Chairman.
Yep.
And water butts, I think, is covered. Bear with me.
Yep.
I can add it to the requirements of condition 24, Chairman.
That would be very good, and I think would meet the mood of the meeting. Okay, thank you very much, David. So just going back to Councillor Ruffles, given that there's been a little bit more conversation, Councillor Ruffles, are you still okay to propose?
Yes, Chairman, what I've heard just in the last few moments hasn't changed my general attitude. It doesn't have to be me that proposes, but I just have been wanting to come in with questions, and one by one they have been asked, and probably asked in a better way than I could have done. So I'm satisfied that my preparation wasn't in vain for this meeting, that we've covered the ground. It's a site I know well because a previous member of this committee was the farmer there, Councillor Lewis Sapstead, and his family home, when that was an operating farmyard, was a very welcome place, and Councillor Bull will remember that. And I do take my motorcycle there still to have an MOT in the yard. It wasn't a DPI declarable interest, but the site I know well. And I'm mentioning that only because the one thing that troubles me still, albeit I'm going to propose that we approve the application, is the relationship in built terms between the development site and the historic village. The development site itself, as we've heard this evening, is an ancient one and very much in real terms, if not policy terms of planning professionals, in real terms is very much part of the integral part of that. And I'm disappointed, and you'll say this is a fetish, that there are no sort of country chimney pots on some of the new builds. I wouldn't expect it on the conversions, but somehow I do like the way it's been despoiled. The 40% has been appropriately fitted into the site. The general layout of the site works well, but I still think there's a smack of urban development being planted close to Dane End, in particular, Little London. And I'm afraid still having some concerns and hope that the highway engineers are right in what they feel they can achieve safely. That is an abiding concern, but I can't, we've had the arguments and we have heard from the professionals themselves very clearly, and I can see the benefit of that virtual path as long as it's safe. But having said all of that, Chairman, I do think it's a good application. The committee has spent a long time on it this evening, but so have officers and the developer, the proposer, for a long, long time. And I think there's a tribute there to David in particular, but to both parties for the work they've done on the long journey to reach this pretty satisfactory point. So I formally propose the approval of the application.
Thank you very much indeed, Peter. It's also very impressive that you're prepared to sacrifice your MOT for the greater good. Just before I ask for a seconder, I wonder if I just go back to David Snell. Peter Ruffles has a very live interest in chimneys, as I suspect you know. And I don't know that Peter's not saying that he would object to this application because he's not seeing any chimneys. But is there any scope for you in conversation with the developer just to see if they might be able to lob in an extra chimney or two somewhere?
A plastic one or two would do, Chairman. It's the visual rather than the actual air pollution.
I've got a confession to make, Chairman, as an officer, and it's probably to some extent the way the design has turned out. I, as an officer and a professional, I do not like dummy chimneys. I think to transport old design into new design, my advice would be to transport that into chimneys that aren't functional, and the ones I've seen are usually made of all sorts of materials, but some are made of glass reinforced plastic. And as a professional, I can't recommend it.
Okay. I think it would not be right of us to push this further. The Councillor Ruffles has made his point. I think all the public speakers are still listening, I believe. So no doubt the point has been heard. So we have a proposer for the application. Do I have a seconder? I think I saw Councillor Kemp. You're just fractionally late on the button, Councillor Buckmaster, aren't you? So Councillor Kemp is seconding, Councillor Ruffles is proposing. All those in favour, please show your hand. Please leave your hand on the screen long enough so it can be counted.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, Chairman.
Thank you very much. You can lower your hands now, members. Anyone against?
No.
And
any abstention?
Any abstentions, of course. Any abstentions? We have one abstention.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for a very good debate, members. We have just voted to approve application number 319-2211 FUL, That is a proposal for the part conversion and part demolition of existing buildings, provision of mixed-use development for B1 use business, and retention of existing agricultural buildings, erection of 26 buildings, 10 to be affordable housing, works to include access, landscaping, engineering and associated works, provision of car parking spaces and cycle spaces, and this is for land at Home Farm, Munden Road, Dane End. Thank you very much indeed. Very, very good debate. So that gets us through item 5. Item 6 is simply items for reporting and noting. They commence at page 61 of your pack. I just ask you to confirm that you have noted those items, please.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think we can take that as noted.
Thank you.
And that simply leads us to item 7, urgent business. I'm unaware that there is any urgent business.
No, Chairman, none.
No, in which case, at 20 to 9 exactly, this meeting is finished. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.